There is a David versus Goliath fight going on right now in the law courts of Spain. On the one hand, there are a small number of individuals who consider themselves to be victims of religious persecution. These comprise the David in our scenario. The mighty Goliath is a multi-billion-dollar corporation in the guise of a Christian religion. This religious corporation has persecuted these Christians over the years, who now cry out as victims. There is nothing wrong with this outcry. In fact, it is prophesied to occur. When they opened the fifth seal, I saw underneath the altar the souls of those slaughtered because of the word of God and because of the witness they had given. They shouted with a loud voice, saying, "Until when, sovereign Lord, holy and true, are you refraining from judging and avenging our blood on those who dwell on the earth?" And a white robe was given to each of them, and they were told to rest a little while longer until the number was filled of their fellow slaves and their brothers who were about to be killed as they had been. Revelation 6, 9-11, New World Translation. In this instance, the killing isn't literal, though on occasion it does end up that way, because the persecution is so emotionally intense that some have sought escape by taking their own life. But the religious corporation in question has no empathy or love for such ones. It does not consider them to have been victimized, just as Jesus predicted would be the case. Men will expel you from the synagogue. In fact, the hour is coming when everyone who kills you will think he has offered a sacred service to God. But they will do these things because they have not come to know either the Father or me. John 16, 2 and 3, New World Translation. Surely it is because this religious corporation believes it is doing God's will that it has the temerity, having already persecuted and victimized these disciples of Christ once, to do so yet again using the law courts of the land. The David in this fight is the Asociación Española de Víctimas de los Testigos de Jehová, in English, the Spanish Association of Victims of Jehovah's Witnesses. Here is a link to their website. The Goliath, if you haven't already guessed, is the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses represented through its branch office in Spain. The first of 4 lawsuits brought by the Organization of Jehovah's Witnesses against the Association of Victims of Jehovah's Witnesses has just been concluded. I had the honor of interviewing the attorney representing the Association of Victims, our David. I'll start by asking him his name and to please give us a little background information.
Bien, pues yo me llamo Carlos Bardavio Antón, soy abogado desde hace 16 años.
Yes, my name is Carlos Bardavio Antón. I have been a lawyer for 16 years. I am also a professor of criminal law at 2 universities. I did my doctoral thesis on religious sects in criminal law, and I published it in 2018 under the title Las sectas en derecho penal, estudio dogmático del tipo sectario, or in English, Sects in Criminal Law, a study of dogmatic sectarianism. So, within my field of criminal law, a large part of my work pertains to helping those who feel that they are victims of coercive groups or religious sects and seek to publicly denounce their practices. In 2019, I became aware of the Spanish Association of Victims of Jehovah's Witnesses. This association was presented to the public through the Spanish American Association of Psychological Abuse Research, in which I also participated. Specifically, we explore the topic of legal strategies relating to combating and suing mind-controlling sects. This also includes the crimes of psychological manipulation and coercive persuasion. Because of my connection with the Spanish Association of Victims of Jehovah's Witnesses, I was well suited to become the association's legal counsel when the Organization of Jehovah's Witnesses mounted a lawsuit against them. So about a year and a half ago, the Association of Victims called to inform me that a lawsuit has been filed by the religious denomination of Jehovah's Witnesses in Spain, seeking monetary remuneration for defamation. In short, this lawsuit demanded the removal of the word victims from the name of the Association of Victims, and also the removal of the word victims from the webpage and its statutes. Statements such as the Jehovah's Witnesses are a destructive sect that can ruin your life, your health, even your family, your social environment, etc., were to be removed. So what we have done in response is to defend the association and its victims by providing the real truth about their victimization of 70 individuals by means of submitting their written testimonies in record time, in just 20 days. In addition to those 70 testimonies, 11 or 12 people testified in court. The trial has now just ended. There were 5 very long sessions. It was very hard work. 11 witnesses representing Jehovah's Witnesses also testified, claiming essentially that everything was marvelous and perfect within their organization.
The witness's testimony that everything was marvelous and perfect doesn't surprise me because of my years serving within the witness community. Can you tell us what was the effect of the sworn testimony from the victims?
Well, when it came time for the victims to give their testimony, the stories they told of how they were victimized were atrocious. So atrocious that many people in the courtroom were moved to tears by the accounts that were presented. It took 3 full sessions for the court to hear the entirety of the testimony from those 11 victims. The trial ended on January 30th, 2023, and we are awaiting the ruling of the court. It's important to note that we had the support of the Prosecution Ministry of Spain, which represents both the law and the state, and always intervenes in proceedings where there is an alleged violation of a fundamental right, whether criminal or, as in this case, civil. Therefore, the legal support of the Prosecution Ministry as the representative of the state was very important.
To clarify for our English speakers, Wikipedia states that the prosecution ministry, Spanish Ministerio Fiscal, is a constitutional body integrated into the judiciary of Spain, but with full autonomy. It is entrusted with defending the rule of law, the rights of the citizens, and public interest, as well as watching over the independence of the courts of justice. Carlos, did the prosecution ministry support the cause of the defendants, the victims?
Yes, it did. It provided legal support to the Spanish Association of Victims of Jehovah's Witnesses. What the prosecution ministry stated in brief summation is that all the information supplied by the Association of Victims falls under, first, freedom of speech, which is very important as a fundamental right. Second, that this freedom of speech has been expressed in an appropriate way. That is to say that one can express one's opinion always with a certain, let's say, politeness, without using offensive words that are not necessary. And if there are some offensive words, that they be appropriate to the context. Of course, if the victims say that there are certain, let's say, certain manipulations, certain issues that affect their psychological health, etc., one cannot say otherwise, as long as the association does not say something that goes beyond the context of what the victim is saying. And of great importance, the prosecution ministry, as a representative of the state, said that in addition to the right of freedom of speech, the association has a right to exercise freedom of information. That means the right to warn society in general through critical analysis in support of the victims. The Association of Victims has the right to provide information to the people of Spain, and indeed to the people of the world. The prosecution ministry made this very clear by declaring, there is a public interest and a general interest in society to know what is happening within the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses. So much is this the case that the public prosecutor said in open court that because of the many media sources available, there is a general interest in this information. So, the rights of the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses to preserve its good name cannot take precedence over the right to freedom of speech and freedom of information.
So, has the case been decided, or is it still awaiting trial?
Estamos esperando sentencia porque el Ministerio Fiscal es una parte más.
Well, we're awaiting a ruling. These procedures are affected by the inclusion of the prosecution ministry, Ministerio Fiscal, which has full autonomy and thus does not answer to either the plaintiff or the defendant. Its participation in the proceedings is an important yet independent element. In the end, the judge takes everything into consideration before rendering her ruling, which is anticipated to be made public by the end of April or the beginning of May of this year.
Carlos, I'm sure this is taxing the patience of the defendants, the victims in this case.
Very much so. These people who feel they have been victimized represent not only victims in Spain, but others in other countries. We know this through communications on social media. All are anxiously waiting for the sentence because they consider that this lawsuit is yet another attack upon them. There are so many victims, so many people feel victimized. They consider that this lawsuit launched by the organization is really attacking their honor and reputation, as if they have no right to consider themselves a victim.
I'm going to pause the interview here for a moment to reason with those of you who are watching and who may be feeling conflicted. because you have been told through the publications of the Watchtower Corporation and by the members of the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses that disfellowshipping is a Bible requirement. The only rule that Jesus gave us, remember Jesus, the only one who has the right under God to make the rules? Well, the only rule he gave us about disfellowshipping is found at Matthew 18:15-17. If an unrepentant sinner does not want to stop sinning, he is to be for us like a man of the nations, that is, a non-Jew, or a tax collector. Okay, but Jesus talked with men of the nations. He even performed miracles for them, as when he healed a servant of a Roman soldier. And as for tax collectors, the one recording Jesus' words about disfellowshipping was Matthew, the tax collector. And how did he become a disciple? Wasn't it because while he was still a tax collector, Jesus spoke with him? So this idea of witnesses that you have to not say so much as a hello to a disfellowshipped person is bogus. But let's go deeper. Let's go into the worst part of the sin of shunning practiced by Jehovah's Witnesses, shunning someone simply because they have resigned as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I remember when I was an elder and a Catholic, for instance, wanted to be baptized, I was instructed to tell them to write a letter of resignation and hand it into their priest. They had to resign from the church before being baptized as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, what happened to them? Did the priest read an announcement in the church so that all the Catholics in the town would know that they were not allowed even to say hello to the person? Would the 1.3 billion Catholics in the world know that they must not even say hello to that person because he had resigned from the church? Would they risk being excommunicated for disobeying this rule, as is the case with Jehovah's Witnesses, who violate the law of shunning a disfellowshipped person? So you can imagine my shock when I first learned that the organization has such a thin skin that they would feel the need to spend time and money to attack people they're currently shunning, because those people had the temerity to dare to disagree with the policy and call it out for what it is, an unscriptural punishment invented by men, not God, as a means to control the flock. When a man abuses his wife and then learns that she has denounced him publicly, what does he often do? I mean, if he is a typical wife beater and bully, does he leave her alone? Does he acknowledge that she is right and he has sinned against her? Or does he threaten her to try to get her to submit and remain silent? That would be the cowardly way of acting, wouldn't it? Something that is typical of a bully. That the organization that I was once so proud of could act like a cowardly bully shocked me. How far they have fallen. They like to think they are the only Christians being persecuted, but they have become just like the churches they have long criticized for their persecution of true Christians. They have become the persecutors. I wasn't sure if this perception might also be shared by those who have never been Jehovah's Witnesses, so I asked Carlos about that. This is what he had to say.
The first thing I noticed upon hearing of the lawsuit was that the religious denomination of Jehovah's Witnesses did not think things through. They didn't adequately plan for the potential of our strategy, which was to defend ourselves with the truth, specifically the very believable first-hand accounts of the victims themselves. But it doesn't stop with this first case. On the 13th of February, another case began. The plaintiff, the Organization of Jehovah's Witnesses, has not only sued the association, but also the individuals making up its board of directors. It has launched 3 additional lawsuits, one against the administrator, a second against the assistant administrator, and finally one against a director who is simply a delegate. In the second of 4 lawsuits, the strategy of the organization has been more clearly exposed. The idea that was relayed to the judge by the plaintiff is precisely what you have stated, that they believe the Organization of Jehovah's Witnesses is being unjustly persecuted by these victims when they publicize their accounts. Now, I, at one point, asked one of the Jehovah's Witnesses if he had noticed from the testimony of some witness elders on Monday the 13th and yesterday the 15th that when questions about whether they had called on or been interested in any of the alleged victims, none of them had called on any of the 70 alleged victims, nor did any of them know if anyone else had called on those victims to offer support.
Again, this sad situation is no surprise to me. Witnesses like to talk about how they exemplify Christian love, but the love the organization and its members practice is very conditional. It has nothing to do with the love Jesus said would identify his disciples to people on the outside. He said, I'm giving you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You also love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love among yourselves. John 13:34 and 35. I really can't imagine any Christian feeling victimized by Jesus, nor having to fight off a lawsuit against him.
Quite so. My understanding is that they make no attempt to contact these people who feel victimized. Instead, their response is to sue the association that has organized the victims, given them a platform to speak from, and has provided them with support and comfort. They have been adversely affected psychologically. Of course, they speak out to some degree because of the suffering they have endured due to the ostracism or shunning policies of the organization. But now to add to that, they are being branded as liars. The pain this causes makes it natural for them to want to win out against their accusers, and so they are anxious to get the ruling of the court. I have repeatedly told them that judicial suits do not end with the first judge's ruling. There is always the possibility of an appeal. It may even go to the Spanish Constitutional Court, which is similar to the American Supreme Court or the Supreme Court of Canada, for example. And then there would even be one more instance, which is the European Court of Human Rights. Therefore, the battle can be very long.
A prolonged case will only expose these legal machinations to the public more and more. Given that, do you feel that this has turned out to be a very poorly thought out legal strategy on the part of Jehovah's Witnesses? Would it not have been better for them to have done nothing?
I think so. From what the people who feel they are victims tell me, this has been a painful process for them. But the way through it for the 70 people involved is to just tell the truth, their truth. Therefore, I believe that if the media here in Spain and in other parts of the world have echoed and exposed what is happening in Spain, and indeed all over the world, it will have caught the organization off guard. We have appeared on television, for example, on Televisión Española, which is the national public channel. We have appeared on other private channels, and what has caught the attention of journalists and others is the hypocrisy of a religion that is supposed to be empathetic and supportive of those who feel victimized, whether they are more or less right, obviously, but that instead has chosen to sue these people. This only makes the problem worse, further separating family members from one another. Even more, it creates a confrontation between family members, with the testimonies of Jehovah's Witnesses against those of relatives who are no longer witnesses, but victims instead. This creates a major rift that is doing a lot of damage.
I'm sure it has. In my faith, this means there is one more thing to answer for before God. But I have a question regarding the judicial system in Spain. Are court trial manuscripts made public? Can we learn exactly what was said by all parties?
And here in Spain, trials are recorded. The 5 trial sessions of this case were all recorded, usually with good quality. But it is also true that I have seen some sessions which, because of the cell phones that are in the courtroom, sometimes there is some interference, some beeps, that sometimes it is annoying to listen to the trial. So the question you're asking is very interesting because it's not very clear if in Spain it's possible. The trials are public, that is. Anyone who wants to enter the trial can enter. In this case, the courtroom was very small and only 5 people could enter for each part of the case, for each part of the procedure. Then there's the problem of privacy. Even though these are public trials, there are intimate details revealed concerning the experiences of the people who testify. Some of these are very delicate and intimate details. There's a debate going on in Spain because of a law, the Personal Data Protection Law. I don't know whether all the information revealed in this trial can be released to the public. Personally, I doubt it because of the right to protect the privacy of all parties.
I understand. We would not want to add to the pain of the victims by releasing intimate and painful details to the public. What interests me personally, and what would serve the public at large, would be to release the testimony of those defending the position of the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses. They believe they are defending the good news and upholding the sovereignty of Jehovah God. Given that, they believe they are guided by and protected by Holy Spirit. Matthew 10:18-20 tells true Christians that when going before a judge or a government official, we do not need to worry about what we will say because the words will be given to us in that instant, for Holy Spirit will speak through us. The truth of the matter is that in recent years, in court case after court case, that has not happened for Jehovah's Witnesses. The world saw that firsthand when Jehovah's Witness elders and even Jeffrey Jackson, a member of the governing body, were put under oath by the Royal Commission of Australia that was investigating institutional child sexual abuse and how to handle it. And that was some years ago. And they were shown to be totally confounded by the questions put to them.
But I'm going to give you my opinion first on the sessions, the 5 hearings. There were journalists, even some television producers, as far as I understand, not only from the print media, but from the television, I believe, both national and international. Of course, it's up to them to get the info however they can and to broadcast it as they wish, but it is also true that there was an audience in the room that will be able to tell what they see fit to reveal. My feelings about what you say about the biblical passage in Matthew is that the organization's witnesses were very well prepared in their answering the questions put to them by their own lawyers. However, when it came my turn to question them, they were very reticent to answer, claiming often that they couldn't recall things. They kept asking me to repeat the question put to them. They didn't seem to understand anything about which I was asking them. It was evident that the answers they were giving to their own lawyers had been well rehearsed. Their answers were straightforward and given without hesitation, and all well rehearsed. That really caught my attention, very much so. Of course, for these reasons, after they had given this complete testimony on behalf of the plaintiff, Joe Witnesses, it was very challenging for me to bring out the inconsistencies and contradictions in their statements, but I believe I was able to do it effectively. And I believe that fortunately, whatever happens, the ruling is likely to include a large part of those statements of the Jehovah's Witnesses members. Therefore, if the court transcript is not published because of the issue of protecting privacy and personal information, since the ruling of the court is public, it is likely that large parts of the transcript are made public, and this would include much of the testimony given by Jehovah's Witnesses on behalf of their organization.
Okay, that's it. So we will get some benefit out of this beyond the eventual ruling of the judge.
Notice that, for example, a retired spokesman for Jehovah's Witnesses in Spain, who acted on behalf of the organization for almost 40 years until 2021, testified for 3 hours. He said many things that, according to my clients, seem to contradict what is generally preached and accepted by Jehovah's Witnesses. Likewise, the elders, publishers, etc., who testified for anywhere between an hour and a half to 2 hours each, stated things that, to my knowledge, as well as to that of the associations of victims, contradicted certain biblical teachings and current policies of the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Some years ago in Canada, we saw a lawyer for Jehovah's Witnesses, whom I know personally, David Gadam, argue before the Supreme Court that the JW policy of shunning disfellowshipped and disassociated members was only on a spiritual level. He claimed that it didn't touch family relationships or anything like that. And all of us who were in the know, all of us who were or are Jehovah's Witnesses knew immediately that this lawyer was speaking a bald-faced lie to the highest court in the land. You see, we know and have lived the practice of that policy. We know that anyone violating the shunning policy and ignoring the rule to shun someone who the elders of the congregation have denounced from the platform will themselves be threatened with shunning, that is, disfellowshipping. Carlos then told us that he asked the witnesses about disfellowshipping by referring to the Shepherd the Flock of God book published by the Watchtower Society, specifically the subsection titled When to Form a Judicial Committee. Using this book, which had been entered into evidence, he put it to both publishers as well as elders who were on the stand what they believed disfellowshipping and shunning involved. Here is the surprising answer he got.
Both in the trial of the association as well as the second trial of Gabriel, to the elders representing the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses, we showed the book, Shepherd the Flock of God, on page 86, if memory serves, where the subheading reads, When to Form a Judicial Committee, and to the JW Witnesses who were not elders, like regular publishers or pioneers, we showed the organized book, chapter 14, again, if memory serves, where it speaks of disfellowshipping and handing the man over to Satan. I think that's on page 150 of the current version. I'm pretty sure because I was working on that part just today. Well, both groups, both elders and regular publishers, testified that the decision to disfellowship is taken freely by each individual JW, that the elders do not disfellowship, but that it is a free decision taken by each Jehovah's Witness. So I asked them, if that's the case, why is it called disfellowshipping, in Spanish expelling? Evidently, they couldn't answer that. That's very shocking because everyone knows. I don't know how it is said in English, but in Spanish, to expel means you want to be in some place and they throw you out. So what we have heard is a redefining of terms. They're saying that people expel or disfellowship themselves because they have sinned, so they have decided to leave. But that is not true. If a person attends a judicial committee, it is because he does not wish to be disfellowshipped or expelled. If he wanted to leave, he would just leave. We all get that. So this was eye-opening for me, and it is something that should be made known more widely in some way.
The fact is that within the witness community, there is no fundamental difference between disassociation and disfellowshipping.
I'm not going to contradict you because many of the alleged victims have told me that they have no choice but to disassociate. It was the only way for them to break free. However, they never imagined, and this is very significant, even knowing that the possibility existed that they would lose their family, they never believed that would really happen to them, nor were they prepared for the pain that would bring.
You have to experience the pain and trauma of being shunned by your entire social network, including your closest family members, even children shunning parents or parents throwing children out of the house, to understand how very horrible and unchristian it is.
No one is arguing that it is wrong to expel someone. For example, this question recently came before the authorities in Belgium. The issue isn't the right to expel, but rather whether it is right to shun. For example, if I have to tavern and expel someone because he does not comply with the rules of the establishment, then okay. The problem is how the expulsion is done and under what conditions the expulsion is done. This is something that has not been debated in court, at least as far as I know, in a clear way, as it is happening now in Spain.
I couldn't agree more. These are issues that have to be brought into the light so that the public can understand what is really going on inside the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses. Jesus said, "For there is nothing hidden except for the purpose of being exposed. Nothing has become carefully concealed, but for the purpose of coming into the open." Mark 4:22. This will finally provide relief for thousands. You see, there are many, many Jehovah's Witnesses who no longer believe, but who continue to hide their true feelings for fear of losing out on important family relationships. We call them in English PIMO, physically in, mentally out.
I know.
Yeah.
For example, in yesterday's trial in the second session, the first one alleged victim on our side, after about an hour testifying, said something very logical, very sensible. He said something that I think everybody can agree with. He testified that Jehovah's Witnesses preach religious freedom, that they should be allowed to religious freedom, that they should not be persecuted, and that is fantastic, of course, in any civilized country or world. Then he added that, for that reason, he could not understand why, when he exercised his religious freedom to leave the witnesses, all his family and friends in various congregations, some 400 people, were obliged to disrespect his decision by shunning him to the point of not even being able to speak to him. The explanation was given in a very simple and straightforward way. It was clear that the judge in the case understood this as the key point.
Is it correct to say that the organization has launched 7 lawsuits?
No, there are only 4. There are one against the Spanish Association of Victims, another one against the president personally, another one against the secretary personally, and another one against the administrator of social networks, who is Gabriel, which is the trial they are doing right now on the 13th and yesterday. So they are 1 against the association and 3 personally against 3 people. So we are right now in the 2nd proceeding. In March, we have the 3rd proceeding, which will mark the 3rd trial scheduled for March 9th and 10th. That one will be against the secretary of the association. As for the lawsuit against the president of the Association of Victims, at the moment we do not have the trial date.
So this is not a single lawsuit, but 4 independent but related lawsuits.
Correct, and this is striking because there are many complaints concerning what the association says, or what the president says, or what the secretary says, which creates confusion as to whether it is a person or the association that is speaking. This makes for so much confusion that we have been able to take advantage of it in mounting our defense, because in the end, it becomes difficult to know who is accountable for what was said, the president or the association. For me, it's the association, as a legal person that makes the statement. As part of my defense, I show that this tactic of splitting the lawsuit into four amounted to suing multiple persons for the same alleged offenses. Realizing that this tactic of theirs has misfired, they petitioned the court to have the four cases combined into one, but the judges, recognizing this tactic for what it was, said, no way, we won't allow you to pull that. You chose this method thinking it would benefit you, and now you have to carry it through.
So there are four different judges.
Actually, no, there are four cases, but three different judges, with one judge presiding over two cases. The judge who's in charge of the trial of the association, the one that has just ended, is also the same judge of the trial we are doing this week, which is that of Gabriel Pedrero, who is the administrator of the association. It is a benefit that the same judge hears the first two cases because that gives her greater knowledge going in, thanks to what has been revealed in the 5 previous sessions of the first case. But it's also true that it's a very tiring case, that is, for one judge to carry the trial of the association and the trial of Gabriel, which is the same thing. Even more witnesses testified in this trial than in that of the association. For the association's trial, there were 11 on each side giving their testimony during 5 sessions. For the second trial, there are 4 sessions, but 15 witnesses testifying for each side. The downside of that is that it can be very tiring for the judges to listen to the same thing again. But on the other hand, the judge already has prior knowledge of what happened in the trial of the association, which is very positive, and the representatives from the prosecution ministry are also the same. So the prosecutor who supported us in the first trial against the association is also present in this other trial, which is very positive for us because she supported us before.
Are the 4 trials going to be over?
Well, the judge commented that both the ruling for association trial and that of Gabriel will come out at the end of April or 1st of May. But it can take longer than anticipated. But more or less, she gave us to understand that around those dates, the trial against Enrique Carmona, who is the secretary of the association, which starts on March 8th and 9th, is comprised of only 2 sessions. I estimated that the ruling on that trial will be issued in June or July. The last proceeding, which is against the president of the association, should have been the first given the natural order of things. What happened? The judge assigned to that case, upon learning that there were multiple lawsuits that were essentially the same, ruled that she would wait for the other suits to be concluded, and would only hold hers if there was information to present that was manifestly different from what was already been presented. It was the same, then there was no reason to hold more sessions. Therefore, for the last lawsuit, the one targeting the president of the Association of Victims, there is as yet no date set, and I don't think there will be one until we have rulings on the first 3.
And they are seeking not only to eliminate the name and existence of the association, but they're also looking for money.
Yes, and this is a remarkable aspect of the lawsuit. It really surprised me. The normal goal when someone files a defamation lawsuit of this type is to have the libel's statements removed and that there would be some financial compensation for the harm done. But in this instance, in all the lawsuits, the plaintiff is not specifying how much they are seeking. They say that they are looking for financial compensation, but in the filings they do not specify how much they are seeking. Okay, there's that. Then in the trial for the Association of Victims, after 5 sessions, on the very last day of the trial, after a year and a half has gone by since the initial filing, during the closing remarks, my esteemed colleague, the plaintiff's lawyer, said that they were going to ask for monetary damages. This, right out of the blue, he claimed that proper compensation would amount to, at a minimum, 350,000 euros. But that they could be justified in asking for millions of euros due to the enormous harm the association has caused the religion. But as a favor to the defendant, they were only going to ask for 25,000 euros, which is what they did. They asked for 25,000 euros, which is about 30,000 US dollars. That's nothing, a very small amount to ask for. I replied to them with 2 responses. The first was that if they were short 25,000 euros, that I'd be happy to make them a gift of that sum of money. If that's all they needed, I'd be happy to have that over to them. No problem. Of course, I said that sardonically because it seemed so odd for them to ask that amount. Second, that they should wait until the final day at the very end of the trial to ask for this money, without providing any verifiable justification for the amounts they were asking for seemed very odd. I told them, you've asked for 25,000 euros without telling us why you need that money as compensation, or what is the basis for asking for it. For instance, you haven't specified how many Bibles you failed to sell, or how many clients or future members you failed to recruit, or how many current members have left, or how much revenue you have failed to receive. You haven't given me any proof, so I just have to pay you 25,000 euros because you say so. That's why I told them, listen, If you are in need of the funds, I'll give them to you myself.
If you win, and I hope you do, I am very confident that you will win, because from what I see, reason and justice is on your side. But if you win, is it possible that the judge or judges would levy a fine against the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses?
No, only if it were a very frivolous claim. It is something very, very false, based on lies. It would be very exceptional for the court to do that. That is very unlikely to happen in these cases. What can happen here is that if we win, everything stays as it is. The association can continue to call itself Society of Victims and continue to publish what it has been publishing. And we would win our costs. That is to say, the religion denomination would have to pay for my professional services. In Spain, my professional services are based in relation to the amount requested as compensation. Of course, if we win and if they had asked for 1 million euros, then I and the association would have earned much more money in costs. However, since they have asked for only 25,000 euros, a laughable amount to ask for, then the cost can only be set at about 6 or 7,000 euros, which is nothing, a pitiable amount to cover costs. But it is also true that the same thing could happen in the other 3 cases, of course, assuming that we win. Of course, if we lose, then the association would have to pay 25,000 euros, which thankfully isn't much. In the end, after all the fuss that's been made over this, after all that has transpired in the end, it all comes down to removing the name victims and getting 25,000 euros. That's it.
When I first learned about this lawsuit launched against victims of shunning by the witnesses, I thought that the organization had lost its mind. The whole thing seems so petty, ridiculous, and spiteful. It seemed to me that the organization was shooting itself in the foot. They like to keep things in the dark and often refuse to speak with the media, yet here they are launching an attack on people who have been victimized. From the standpoint of the world, this is a no-win scenario. They will just look like bullies, win or lose. Even if we take the view that witnesses are the purest of Christians, a view I do not hold, but even if I did, then why do they not act like Christians? This seems to be the inevitable outcome of a policy that has continued to put the organization as a sort of golden calf. Jehovah's Witnesses now worship the organization and hold it up as the means to salvation. The organization claims to be the channel through which Jehovah God speaks to Christians today. So saying anything against the organization is essentially blasphemy to them. By no longer viewing themselves as individual Christians under one leader, Jesus Christ, witnesses have adopted a groupthink mentality. Thus, they can justify ignoring clearly stated commands from God in favor of organizational directives. For instance, our Lord Jesus tells us to return evil for evil to no one, take into consideration what is fine from the viewpoint of all men. That would include how the world sees these lawsuits. He continues, if possible, as far as it depends on you, be peaceable with all men. Again, launching a lawsuit hardly qualifies as being peaceable. Then Jesus says, do not avenge yourselves, beloved, but yield place to the wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says Jehovah. These lawsuits are clearly vengeful in nature. Then our Lord says, but if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by doing this, you will heap fiery coals on his head. Do not let yourself be conquered by the evil, but keep conquering the evil with the good. It's all from Romans 12:17-21. Again, they consider these victims as apostates, as enemies. But rather than follow this command from Jesus, they persecute them further. If Jehovah's Witnesses were to have applied this counsel of our Lord, they would not have people so embittered and so traumatized that they would feel it necessary to form an association of victims. Even if these victims are in the wrong, which they are not, but even if they were, a lawsuit of this kind shows that the leaders of the organization do not believe that Jehovah will avenge, and so they must do so themselves. And what moves them to do so? Pettiness. These men do not know what real persecution is. Faithful Christians, former Jehovah's Witnesses, who are now shunned for standing up for truth, these are the ones who know what it is to suffer for the Christ. But these men get their nose out of joint because those they have persecuted and are persecuting dare to warn others as they decry the injustices they have suffered. They are like the Pharisees, who also acted like children whose pride had been wounded. Check it out at Matthew 11:16-19.
I have also noticed from the sworn testimony given by the Jehovah's Witnesses in court that they express feelings of hurt in both trials we have held so far. They feel very, very slandered and hurt by what the Association of Victims has claimed. They feel persecuted in some way and that their reputation has been damaged. They give the impression that there is more hatred towards them since the association was founded. So I have the feeling that having launched this lawsuit, they have garnered even more attention in the media. Because I may be wrong, but it appears that this is the first time something like this has happened. And of course, there is great interest in all the media. So by having initiated this action, they're experiencing some collateral damage because by suing their victims, many Jehovah's Witnesses are coming to know what the Association of Victims has been saying. My clients just told me that there are instructions to Jehovah's Witnesses not to read or listen to negative news about the organization in the media. So what happens now? With so many media outlets, the information inevitably finds its way into the hands of individual Jehovah's Witnesses in one way or another, and this indirectly causes the members of the organization more harm. Actually, everyone is being harmed by this legal action.
Thank you, Carlos, for providing this information and these insights for our audience. In closing, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share?
Yes, the truth is that I am very grateful for this opportunity to speak because this case is very important to me, both personally and professionally. I've been very motivated by the Association of Victims' decision to hire me because I have been working on my doctoral thesis on this type of situation, and so I feel that I'm very prepared for this type of defense. I have felt a great solidarity with the victims having heard their accounts. One of them called me to tell me that they'd been considering suicide. I've heard about many psychological problems. I've heard from professionals, so I don't doubt the truthfulness. And I have to confess that representing this case has had a profound effect upon me, personally, not professionally. It has affected me because I have seen a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, and so I try to help them as much as possible. I try to do my bit, my job, but fundamentally it is the people who feel they are victims who have to take a step forward and come out into the light to tell the truth, their feelings. The PIMOs also of those who feel they are victims in some way, because the only way that they can inform society of their feelings is by speaking out about them. I'm very happy because we managed in a very short time to gather 70 people who testified in writing or in person before a judge who, for the first time in history, at least as far as I know, in Spain, is getting to know the reality of the victims, of the people who feel they are victims. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to reach an audience such as the English-speaking and also Latin and Spanish-speaking audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos, for being there for those who are being persecuted for the truth. Perhaps some of these victims have lost their faith in God due to the abuse suffered under the organization. The Bible tells us that anyone who stumbles one of the little ones will suffer a very severe judgment. Jesus said that whoever stumbles one of these little ones that believe, it would be finer for him if a millstone, such as is turned by an ass, were put around his neck and he were actually pitched into the sea. Mark 9:42. However, others have remained faithful, and it is their stand for truth that has brought about this persecution. I'm sure that while there are 70 victims who have come forward, there are countless others out there in Spain and indeed around the world who have been similarly victimized. To go by the statistics from the organization itself, we must be talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of individuals. But we also know that those who show mercy to the little one will be shown mercy themselves when judgment day arrives. Is that not the basic message of Jesus' illustration of the sheep and goats? And we also have this assurance from our Lord Jesus. Whoever receives you receives me also, and whoever receives me receives also the one who sent me. Whoever receives a prophet, because he is a prophet, will get a prophet's reward, and whoever receives a righteous man, because he is a righteous man, will get a righteous man's reward. And whoever gives one of these little ones only a cup of cold water to drink because he is a disciple, I tell you truly, he will by no means lose his reward. Matthew 10:40-42. So again, thank you, Carlos, for mounting such a good defense for the downtrodden, and thank you also for exposing the truth about what is going on in this contemptible lawsuit brought against the victims of the Organization of Jehovah's Witnesses. but doubling down on the persecution they have practiced. I will continue to track the progress of these 4 lawsuits and will update you all on the progress as new information becomes available. I just have one more word to add. This is groundbreaking because the organization is actually suing someone for what they consider to be defamation. Now, if that's the case, then when you read these news reports that they constantly claim are negative and should not be listened to, and these are defamatory and spread by apostates, then why aren't they suing CNN, MSNBC, and all the other news networks when they make reports that are negative to Jehovah's Witnesses, if indeed these reports are false, defamatory, and contain lies? The fact that they do not sue anyone indicates that they know that they aren't capable of winning the lawsuits. The fact that they would sue these victims association indicates that they're not above suing. So therefore, the fact that they've sued them and don't sue the rest indicates that all these negative stories, well, they may be negative, but they're not false. Anyway, that's enough for now, and I will continue to inform you as things progress. Thank you very much for watching.